I used to play D&D at Pandemic Studios, and after each game, my friends would ask me, did you have fun? You know, the way you might ask any friend after a game. No one had ever asked me that after D&D before because everyone I'd played with before then sort of understood the role of the DM, but these were new players who weren't familiar with it. So I asked, did you have fun? Yeah, they'd say. Then I had fun. When I said that, they reacted as though I was being facetious, not serious. I was giving a trick answer, they thought, when in fact, I was being totally honest. Running the game is like being Schrodinger's cat. I don't know if I had fun or not until I ask my players. Normally, I don't ask them because that's a leading question. I observe them and judge whether they're having fun or not. If they had fun, I had fun. Doesn't matter if all my ideas went out the window, the only reason I had those ideas was because I thought my players would enjoy it. If they have fun, I have fun. That brings me to today's topic, the sociology of D&D. When I was a kid, my mom took me to the library because we couldn't afford to buy books. I read these great illustrated versions of the Greek myths for kids. I still remember Athena asking Perseus if he was the hero everyone said he was. Saying yes would have been prideful, saying no would have been false humility. So he said, "Try me and see." That situation, that dialogue, has stuck with me ever since. It was easy for me to project myself into Perseus. In the drawings, he looked like me. There was no friction between me and the fantasy. So for me, Fantasyland, the assumed world most fantasy games take place in, you know it, there's a town with a tavern, there's a blacksmith, stables with horses. Fantasyland is very much part of the tapestry of my personal history, my culture. It shows up in a million incalculable ways. My mom read The Once and Future King to me. I went to England on vacation as a teenager and visited a bunch of King Arthur tourist traps. I don't need to think about it. I don't even notice it. It's the default. So it's easy for me to imagine myself in Fantasyland. Now I want you to look around you.
Just look around you.
Look at the other kids in your class. Look at the people sitting around you at the library, at Starbucks. Look at your coworkers, at the people you hang out with after work. Those are your players. Tell them you're going to run D&D and see what happens. People you thought didn't like you will say, wow, sure. People you thought were weird will... Well, they probably are weird, but once you get to know weird people, it turns out a lot of them are really likable. The temptation is to only play with your close friends, with like-minded people, with a group that feels safe. But D&D is how we make new friends, meet new people, learn stuff about people we already labeled. Now, if you look around you and everyone you see is a Western European white male, then by all means, head off to Fantasyland. It was literally made for you. But if you look around you and you see people who look different than you, who are of a different ethnicity or class or of a different gender or sexuality, or who have a completely different attitude toward gender or sexuality than you do, then you have a little bit of work to do. That's important, so I want to say it again. You have some work to do, not them. They are your players. They are guests at your table. You only have fun when they have fun. So think about your campaign setting. What does it say to the players who aren't like you? Your fantasy is in there. Is theirs? Maybe you want to run an adventure with barbarians exploring the distant north, and you have a friend of Middle Eastern ancestry and you think, hey, I've seen movies. You can be an Arab in the north.
When you die, can I give that to me daughter?
Yeah, but to you, the Arab hanging out with the Vikings might be cool because it's a story about how xenophobia is bullshit. But to your friend, it would just be her playing an outsider. And if she already feels like an outsider sometimes, she won't say, nah, I don't want to play an Arab with the Vikings. Let's all play dwarves. She'll just shrug and smile and say, nah, you guys have fun. D&D is not for me. And that means you both lost. That was a potential player who felt unwelcome. I don't know about you, but I have to really not like someone before they start feeling unwelcome around me. But in that scenario, you like that player. You didn't intend to make her feel unwelcome, the opposite. But things fall apart because we insist other people live on our terms. Someone who feels like an outsider in the real world can play D&D and feel the opposite. But that's sort of dependent on your campaign setting. We play games like D&D to get away from all the bullshit we deal with in real life. It is a fantasy. Think about that word. It doesn't just mean elves and orcs and dragons. It also means something we wish were true. I think new players overwhelmingly tend to play characters that act like them and look like idealized versions of themselves. It's usually years of play before they get bored of that and start playing very different characters, really start role-playing. That's fine. Make sure their idealized version of themselves can be found in your world. Remember, unless you're literally going to run a game set on Earth during a historical period, there's no reason for your world to have anything from our world in it unless you think it's neat or useful. The concept of a town is useful because your players know what to expect. But what about gender and ethnicity? When Fantasyland is criticized for its straight white maleness, I often hear, yeah, well, that's how it was back then. What? No, it wasn't. Tolkien invented his world. George R.R. Martin invented his world. And when those guys invented their worlds, they put the things in them they thought were interesting. Those worlds, to one extent or another, reflect their attitudes and interests. But those guys are authors, you're a dungeon master. The difference is your world is one your friends have to like, because while writing is one of the most solitary things you can do, trust me on this, running D&D is one of the most social. It requires friends. Consider yours when building your world. Now, I don't think the only solution is to reject the Western European medieval fantasy, although you are free to do so. It just needs to be adapted a little. One simple solution is to start your game in a huge port city. Yeah, if you go inland, you enter Western European Fantasyland, if that's to your taste, but you start the game by saying, "Welcome to Capital, the greatest city in this or any age," and explain that everyone, everywhere, trades with and in Capital. You can be from anywhere, look like anyone, and reasonably end up here. That sends a clear signal, and it sounds cool. One of the OG D&D guys, might have been Dave Arneson or Tim Kask, said every good campaign world needs a Mediterranean Sea analog. I happen to agree. For 5,000 years, there was this amazing melange of cultures all sailing around the Med, trading, warring. You could meet anyone from anywhere. It was easy to find cosmopolitan cities where great adventure could be had, and just a few miles inland, savage wilderness. Perfect for a D&D setting. So that's one solution. I have a huge port city in my setting for exactly this reason. I also set my game 2,500 years after a Roman Empire analog conquered the world, and, in an attempt to make everyone everywhere feel Roman first and their own culture second, they repatriated an entire generation of kids, taking them from their parents and resettling them around their new empire. Now, 1,000 years after the fall of that empire, there are distinct cultures again, but each culture has people from every ethnicity in it. You can be anyone and be from anywhere. There's a great fantasy series a lot of my friends love by Steven Erikson called Malazan. Something I noticed in that series is that the fantasy world it takes place in is profoundly multi-ethnic. The author was an archaeologist, and when you dig around places like the Middle East, you find an intense blending of thousands of different cultures. Malazan is a great example and totally plausible. I often suggest new players cast their character as a tool to help everyone else visualize them. I say, any actor or actress you might see in a modern film, you can find in this area. And for some players, casting their character is a fun exercise. Telling them their character can look like anyone frees them up to imagine stuff they might not otherwise think of. And that's all it takes. At that point, you've done your job. It's up to them to decide what to play. There's something else we need to talk about, I guess, and that's gender. Odds are, if you're watching this, you are male. I wish that wasn't true, I wish it was more balanced, but I am aware that's the nature of the beast. And I've read a lot of horror stories over the years about this bizarre phenomenon, which I've read about so often that I must conclude it is real, whereby the presence of girls at the boys' table suddenly brings out some very unpleasant behavior in the boys. Maybe that behavior was there all along and no one talked about it until the box was opened and there was an observer. I don't know how to say this, so we're just going to go for it. All of a sudden, the game features rape all the time. Now, that used to really freak me out when I heard that. I've been playing since I was 15. I have played with dozens of different groups. I have never had that experience at the table. But I think I'm a pretty social dude, and I tend to play with other social people, and so maybe we don't have that kind of player at the table? It still disgusts me hearing those stories, and it really, really depresses me that this thing I love, and which I think everyone would get a kick out of, some people have that kind of experience with. But looking around our culture now, I begin to see that for a lot of people, obviously, sexual violence features in their fantasies. A lot of people watch Game of Thrones, and it seemed like the more rape and sexual abuse there was in Game of Thrones, the more people complained about it, but the better it did in the ratings. That is something that baffled me. I find it repugnant. I don't watch that show. I mean, I don't watch it for a lot of reasons. I prefer Shakespeare's War of the Roses fan fiction to Martin's. I also tend to prefer fiction with fewer than 100 main characters, and I tend to read authors that can get a book done in less than 1,000 pages. So obviously that kind of stuff is a big part of people's fantasies, and frankly, in the privacy of your own home and between you and people you're intimate with, there's no problem. Whatever you get up to in your own home is up to you. Whatever you like to read or watch, it's all good. But cut that shit out at the gaming table. It is not why your players came there. My advice is, and it is my strong conviction that you watching this are not someone who need this kind of advice, but some of the people you invite to your table may need to hear this. My advice is, I would not encourage a situation at my table that I would feel weird talking about with my parents. That seems like a useful yardstick. Do not assume that just because they're at your table or because they're your friends, that they're into all the stuff you're into. They are your guests. Consider their feelings first. If they have fun, you have fun. Maybe you've never felt like an outsider. That's fine. You should still be able to empathize with other people. That's what empathy means. Don't be the guy in District 9 who literally had to become another person to finally empathize with them. Once you're done and your campaign is underway, make sure your players meet NPCs who are not straight white dudes. Allow them to meet people like the normal people we see every day. There's tons of art and actor references online. It is trivially easy to make your NPCs look amazing and dramatic and like the people you see around you. At the end of the day, I do not accept that D&D has to be a game for white guys. It's a game for everyone. The worlds we create should have everyone in it. That's all. It's not more complex than that. If you feel like I've gone off the deep end and discussions like this shouldn't be part of the narrative of gaming, that's cool. I disagree with you, obviously, but I bet we'd still have a lot of fun playing games together. But there is a perception among certain people who disagree with the principles of equality and inclusion that someone who looks the way I do and says the things I say must be doing it because of a perceived expectation on his part. He doesn't really believe those things, he's just saying them because that's the currently accepted thing to say if you want a certain kind of attention. You're just going to have to trust me when I say I really believe this stuff. I was a young, intensely materialistic person when I started with D&D, but in college, thanks to a couple of professors and philosophy courses, I discovered that what I really wanted in life was to be happy. And the best way to do that was to be a good person. That has a lot to do with why I DM, because it makes my players happy, and that makes me happy. I used to want to win. I used to play war games, strategy games, Axis and Allies, Squad Leader, Republic of Rome, because I wanted to win a complex strategy game. After college, I wanted my friends to have fun. It's why I started Game Night at Turtle Rock. It's why I run 2 simultaneous games of D&D at work. It's why I'm doing this series. I want you to run D&D not just because it's easy and fun and you'd like it, but because your friends would like it if you ran. Why should I care if your friends have fun? Because I want you to be a river to your people.
I scatter, I burn my enemies' tents. I take away their flocks and herds. The Turks pay me a golden treasure, yet I am poor. Because I am a river to my people.